to open tonight's session, I just want to say good evening and welcome to everybody. Thank you for choosing to spend your evening with us for what is going to be a really special session as part of the What Makes a GP Early Careers Conference. If you were with us in the earlier part of the day, welcome back. And if you're just joining for this session, we're really delighted to have you join us this evening. You can submit your questions for speakers through the chat function in the taskbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to use the chat at any point to share with others. So whether you've got a question or an opinion on something, do put it in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on there, and I'll be putting questions to our speakers in the second half of the session. If your question is directed towards a particular speaker, do put their name in it and I'll make sure that it gets to them. Also, do feel free to turn your cameras on if you like to. It's always good to see who we're talking to, but please do make sure that you stay muted if you can, so that we haven't got any background noise. Just a reminder that we'll be discussing some sensitive topics today. And so if at any point you do need to step away or take a break, please do feel comfortable to do so. We'll be able to let you back in if you need to take some time away from the screen or leave the room for a short period. We'll be sharing resources with further information and support at the end of the evening as well for anybody that will benefit from that. In terms of introductions, my name is Dr. Anthony James. I was the AIT, so Associate in Training Network Chair for the Royal College of GPs from 2019 to the end of last year when I finished my training as well. So I'm now a qualified GP. I work at a practice in North London in Kilburn. I do that for half of the week. For the other half of the week, I do something very, very different. I work at Pink News, which is a digital media company, particularly known for our main brand, Pink News, which is the world's biggest LGBT media publication. And I'm really excited to be chairing this session and to be joined by three really, really fantastic speakers who are going to be sharing their passions and how they got through some really challenging times, particularly over the last year. In the background, we've had our quick poll running, so it would be really good to have a look at the questions and the results now. So if I can get Evie to share those. Okay, so question number one was, have you ever felt overwhelmed at work? And I think probably all of us would say the same. So yes, definitely most days and all of the time. I'm sure that resonates with us all, and particularly, as I say, over the last year where we've been stretched even more than ever before. I think that, yeah, I can imagine that most people would be putting these in, which is just a reflection of the current situation. And then we've got question two as well, which is, how do you feel about the future of general practice? So we've got a few mixed answers, which is always good. So anxious as the number one in the middle there, but we've also got excited and positive, interspersed with, again, some overwhelmed and worried as well. And I mean, that definitely resonates with me. I think that I don't know if I'm just an optimist, but I often feel quite excited and positive about the future. But, you know, equally the day-to-day can be worrying, overwhelming, anxiety provoking, and we'll be touching on definitely all of those topics, I imagine, throughout the course of this evening's session. So thank you to those of you who were able to answer the poll. Thank you for sharing your opinions. That's really helps to kind of set the tone for the room and for the conversations that we're going to be having now as well. So with that, let's get started with the main event. I'm going to let each speaker introduce themselves to you as they answer our first question, which is, when did you first encounter something, whether that's clinically, professionally, or personally, that you really found a connection with? And what was it, and what impact did it have on you? I'm going to go to our first speaker of the evening, Rachel. So if I can get you to introduce yourself and give us your answer for the first question.
Hi everyone, nice to see you on this rather muggy hot evening. My name's Rachel Steen. I'm a newly qualified GP working in Sheffield. I've been running the Trailblazer scheme, which is a scheme supporting newly qualified GPs working in areas of deprivation across Yorkshire and Humber and in other areas of the country too. I also am a trustee of Fair Health, an online educational resource for healthcare professionals tackling health inequalities, and also sit on the RCGP Health Inequality Standing Group. Anthony, thank you for having me to talk today. It's a really interesting question, because I had a lot of answers for this. But I was having a think, and I was thinking back to a point where it was actually quite challenging for me in general practice, and I actually felt that I kind of was questioning whether general practice was for me, really, because I was at the start of my ST3 year in training, and I was working in an area of deprivation, and I was finding it really overwhelming. And it's interesting to see that a lot of people were saying that in the poll at the beginning. And I was finding it busy, really overwhelming, and I was finding that I wasn't really managing to do the best job I could. I didn't think I was finishing the day feeling that I wasn't doing a very good job. And it's interesting, and I was thinking back to sort of why I was feeling like this, and I think it was probably because I was focusing far too much on the clinical element of the job, and at that time, it just fortuitously, really, I started halfway through my ST3 year a leadership fellowship. And what happened around that time was I joined Next Generation GP, which is an amazing network of GPs across the country, started my leadership fellowship, and also had some professional coaching. And all those things kind of happened around the same time for me. And I did a lot of personal and professional development, sort of stepping away from the clinical element of the job. And coming back into general practice, it's actually been really, really transformational for me in terms of my confidence, and also just how I feel in terms of how I interact with patients. So I've always wanted to work in an area of deprivation, and wanting to work with patients from vulnerable groups. And I was feeling really, at that point in the beginning of ST3, I was feeling like, oh, maybe this isn't for me, maybe these aren't the patients I want to work with. And actually now it's really nice to go back and think, actually, they're having stepped away, it's really nice to go back and feel like there are ways in which I can potentially do this. So as part of my leadership fellowship, started the Trailblazer scheme, which was essentially copying what the Deep End Pioneer scheme did in Glasgow, which is supporting newly qualified GPs working in areas of deprivation with that personal and professional development time. And something that I'd experienced in a leadership fellowship during training, I felt could be really beneficial for GPs working in these areas, but also some focused education to support these GPs. And it's been absolutely amazing over the last 3 years working with some of the most incredible GPs, mainly in Yorkshire and Humber, but also across the country as well, who have real passion, real inspiration, and real enthusiasm for working in these areas. It's just been absolutely amazing. Yeah, these inspiring colleagues are just incredible, and it's kind of what has made that part of my job amazing. So I'm currently actually on maternity leave, but it's incredible to know that this is carrying on, and Julie, who's running the scheme in my absence, is doing an amazing job. I think coming back to general practice, it's been amazing after my leadership fellowship just to really focus on kind of the social determinants of health and caring for patients, and focusing on how important that is as part of the job as well as the clinical stuff. And that's really, really helped me as part of the job to really kind of reignite that passion for general practice.
Thanks, Rachel. That's really interesting. I had a kind of similar experience toward kind of a bit earlier during training, during my ST2 year. I took a year out to do a leadership fellowship after my ST2 year, came back into ST3 with a very different perspective and a greater appreciation, I think, for the wider system and ways that I can have a fulfilling career both clinically and outside of the consulting room as well. So it's always good to hear kind of like a very similar story in many ways, like reflected back, and shows the breadth of different opportunities and ways that any of us can be a GP and have a really fulfilling career. So thank you. Next up, we'll go to Simon. Hi, Simon.
Hi, Anthony. I'm Simon Tobin. I'm a GP in Southport, where I've been for 28 years. And I'm passionate about general practice. I think general practice is amazing, and I make no apologies, but challenging. when I look back at there's kind of, for me, a road to Damascus conversion that had, for me, to do with embracing patient-centered general practice. Prior to that, I'd been very sort of protocol focused. I'd been what I call a protocol jockey, chasing points, quaff, nice guidance, doing it by the book. And it was the words of Professor David Haslam, who used to be the chair of NICE, who summed up what makes a great GP in just 4 things. And that profoundly impacted me. Those 4 things, David Haslam said, were shut up, listen, care, and know something. And I think about that almost every week. And for me, that's the quintessential, the essence of what makes a good GP. It's the kind of medicine that excites me and makes me feel like I'm making a difference. From that led really for me to explore lifestyle medicine, to look at ways of changing diet, physical activity, embracing and connecting with your community as ways of delivering improvements in health. My practice has championed low-carb diets for reversing type 2 diabetes. We're a little practice, less than 10,000 patients. We have reversed 100 people's type 2 diabetes in the last 7 years. We've had articles this week in the Daily Mail and the Daily Express to celebrate our 100th reversal. There's no practice in the country that's come close to achieving that. And we've done it just simply through changing diet, cutting out the sugar, cutting out the starchy carbs. We spend less on medicines at my practice for diabetes than any other practice in the CCG by some distance. Yet we have amazing figures for reversing people's diabetes. That's exciting, sexy general practice as far as I'm concerned. I also have a role within Parkrun as a voluntary ambassador for health and wellbeing. And that's been fantastic for me to connect me to my community, to my patients. We've got a parkrun right in the middle of my practice area. And it's a really heartwarming on a Saturday morning to get there, just to see everybody, 400, 500 people coming together, just to chat, to do some exercise, to make connections, to support each other, and just to gather together. And maybe for me, this is where I get excited about social prescribing, it's about just connecting people and meeting and getting people to talk to each other that really makes a difference, in connecting people within a community. So that's what really excites me. But it comes back to those 4 key components of a great GP that David Haslam said. So shut up, listen, care, and know something. Thank you.
I think that's wonderful advice and an incredibly inspiring story to hear about the success you've had, Simon. And for all of us, because all active on Twitter, I know that Simon is very active on Twitter, and I've seen a lot of the work that you've been doing there. So for people that are joining us as well, do follow both Carter, Rachel, and Simon on those platforms to learn more about all of the amazing work that they continue to do. Thank you, Simon. And finally, Carter, I'm going to go to you.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks, Rachel and Simon, for your insights as well. Really useful. Now, we've all got our story to tell, and I'm a true believer that there's a lot of strength and catharsis in sharing one's own challenges, tribulations, trials, failures with others, not so that you tug on heartstrings or you tell it for the charity vote, but so you can perhaps find some inspiration and motivation by telling others and learning how I was able to deal with negatives and turn those into positives. So I hope you don't mind me sharing some of my personal experiences with you. And as Anthony said earlier on, if any of you feel what I say is disturbing or upsetting, then please let us know and put it on the chat or raise your hand or whatever, and Anthony can tell me to shut up. But my story starts off with a girl in the 1970s who lived in Derby, and she was the daughter of economic migrants from Punjab in India who were invited to settle in England in the early 60s and work in the factories and foundries to help plug the labour shortage after the Second World War. The girl had learning disabilities and the mental age of about 8. And her parents, in their naivety, but with the best of intentions, thought they should arrange a marriage for her with a man from India who would hopefully settle in England and look after her, and they could rest easy in the knowledge that she'd be looked after. Scores of men, understandably, lined up in India for the opportunity to escape poverty and to settle in England through marriage at whatever cost. The girl was entered into a forced, non-consensual marriage, and the parents set both her and her new husband up in a house near to their own and helped find employment for their new son-in-law. Once the husband received his shiny new passport and officially became a citizen, he began to show his true colours. He started abusing alcohol and then abusing the girl in all kinds of ways. One of the products of that physical, emotional, and sexual abuse was a baby boy. The boy was also born into the cycle of abuse, and despite the girl's parents' efforts, they were unable to save or protect him from all manner of relentless, depraved child abuse and neglect at the hands of multiple abusers for the first 14 years of his life. And remember, in those days, there was no child protection or child services as we know them today. Children raising issues and concerns to their GPs or teachers were often dismissed or ignored. The boy was severely disturbed, performed poorly at school, and labelled as a naughty kid. And he had daily night terrors and he wet the bed. He was caught in a downward spiral of depression, learned hopelessness and helplessness. And one day, when he finally had enough of the abuse, he was at his lowest ebb and had two choices. Choice one, to finally act on his chronic suicidal ideation and intent and to end his life to stop the suffering, or to fight back and confront his abusers. Unfortunately for him, he chose the latter and he stood up to his abusers. And as with all bullies and cowards, they backed down. And he was able to escape with his mother and speak on behalf of himself and his mother in court. Almost overnight, the boy stopped having night terrors and was able to focus at school. He excelled academically, and against all odds, he was able to secure a place to study medicine, and the rest is history. And you guessed it, that boy was me. So for me, a combination of luck, determination, commitment, hope, and discipline meant that I was able to turn negatives from my past circumstances into positive outcomes for my future. I was able to take control and redefine my circumstances so that they could not control me and determine my future. But not everyone's so lucky. How many times do you see in your daily general practice the opposite? Negative life experiences being the root cause of maladaptive coping mechanisms, substance abuse, mental health problems, criminal activity, incarceration, and even suicide. I was able to grow through the pain that I went through rather than just go through it. And I was able to get up when I was truly down and live to fight another day. Even during my medical training and beyond, I've come up against so many barriers and naysayers, but it's through those failures and setbacks that I've become stronger and more resilient. And every no has brought me one step closer to my yes. And I actively seek failure daily, controlled positive failure to drive personal growth. I know Simon's a runner. I also dabble in a bit of running, and running is a prime example. I run and I push myself to failure every day. And as a result, I become stronger, fitter, and faster. And it's all about mindset. If you can't win the war against your own mind, what hope do you stand to win the war against the challenges that life throws at you every day? So my own personal experiences have provided me with a unique insight into the lives of many of my patients who live in deprivation, who are experiencing their own suffering. And this allows me to be able to establish a rapport with them and to treat them more compassionately. I don't believe in the term, you have to see it to believe it. I believe in the opposite. You have to believe it to see it. And once you believe it, then you can go after it. And if you want it more than what you want to breathe, then you can achieve it. And that's what faith is, believing in that what you cannot see. So they're my motivators in a roundabout way in general practice that I use every day, little skills, little tips and tricks that I pull out of a box, which I keep locked up the rest of the time. And so, yeah, that's in a roundabout way my answer to your question, Anthony.
Thank you, Carter. I think that's, it's an incredibly powerful story to tell. And I think I definitely agree with you. As you say, like being able to be vulnerable obviously requires a lot of courage, but I think it shows a huge amount about who you are and also like the independent journeys that each of us have been on to reach where we are now, and how we can pull on strength from so many different things, even if sometimes they're incredibly negative things as well. So thank you, Carter, for sharing that. I think that's a really brave and very, very powerful thing to have been able to share with us this evening. In terms of moving on to the next question, difficult to do after that, but let's move on to the next question anyway. Now, as GPs, we do tend to wear a lot of hats quite often. That might mean extra roles, both clinical and non-clinical, volunteering, or other interests as well, which may be nothing to do with medicine whatsoever. Not all the time, not everybody does this, of course, but even just doing our usual clinical sessions can often feel like a balancing act with so many different presentations, so many different management plans, so many different things to have to balance in every single day that we spend in the GP setting. I want to ask our speakers, do you think that we pay a price for trying to juggle family, work, extra roles, leadership responsibilities, whatever it might be? Or can we really have it all? I'm going to go to Carter first for this one. So yeah, Carter, what do you think on this?
Yeah, thanks for that, Anthony. And to answer this question, I'm going to backtrack a bit because I forgot to introduce myself. But this links in very nicely with this question. And so I'm a full-time 8-session GP partner in Nottinghamshire. I'm also on the National Council and serve as the Vale of Trent faculty representative. I'm the chair of the Nottinghamshire Local Medical Committee, and for 8 years prior to when the CCGs dissolved, I was one of the governing body board members for Mansfield Nashville CCG. So, and that leads on to the answer really, and not to sound greedy, but I think yes, you can have it all if you effectively plan and prepare. And if you want something bad enough, you can manage to fit it all in and overcome any perceived barriers, because at the end of the day, the barriers are always in your mind. So to apply the Shakespearean quote, nothing is good or bad, thinking makes it so. So if you really think something is out of your reach, it will be, unless you apply yourself to rising up to the challenge. And I've got the same 24 hours that anyone else has in a day, the same as the no-hoper on the street and the same as the Nobel laureate. And it's all about how you utilize your time and your efforts and your energy that matters.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll hear similar things reflected in Simon and Rachel's answers as well. But I think it's clear that for someone like yourself, Carter, for any of us who are kind of driven by things that we enjoy, things that we love to do, even if they are difficult and stressful, in a career like general practice, you can really carve out your own niche quite often and find a career which is really fulfilling. I'm going to go to Simon next for the same question.
Right, well, thank you, Anthony. I agree with Carter. Yes, you can have it all, but, and it's a big but, you have to take control of your life and your career, and you have to be realistic in your hopes. But as a GP, you get to call the shots, and you are in a position to call the shots better than any other branch of medicine. As a cardiology consultant, you can't take a Thursday off regularly for childcare, but as a GP, you can decide, well, Thursday's my childcare day, I can't work that day, and you can arrange your career around that. And there's no medical career that offers that degree of flexibility. But alongside that, we all need to accept that we're not superhuman. You can't just pile it in relentlessly from every angle. You do need to work out what really matters to you and how much of your time, how much of your resource are you going to devote to that. And that takes stepping back and looking at your professional life and looking at your home life and trying to achieve a balance that you feel comfortable with. But ultimately, you're in control. I've been a trainer for 24 years. My current ST3, who finishes in 10 days now, has just accepted a job, a salaried GP job, and it was down for 8 sessions. He got offered the job and said, actually, he didn't want to work 8 sessions. He would prefer to work 6. He wasn't sure how stressful it would be. And he's from Pakistan. He wanted to spend some time you know, maybe Thursday, Friday and the weekend, driving to different parts of the UK and exploring the country. And they agreed. And I think nowadays as a GP, you're in a seller's market. People are desperate for GPs. And I was thrilled that my registrar had thought it through and had decided that initially 6 sessions a week was fine for him. Now, in 6 months, he may increase to 7, 8 sessions. His priorities may change. He may move things around, but he's in control. And as a GP, you can be in control of your professional lives too, but you have to take that control.
Thank you, Simon. And just before I go to Rachel, I do have just a question for both Carter and Simon. I think this is useful for me and Rachel at the earlier stages of our career, being recently qualified, as well as people on the call as well. Simon, I think you rightly kind of identify that, yes, you can have it all, but there needs to be a balance. You need to be realistic. Have there been times in your career, or Carter, similarly for you, where the balance wasn't quite right? And any advice, tips for identifying that and addressing that, if so?
Yes, there have been times for me where I've felt overwhelmed as a GP, and I'd be surprised if there are many GPs out there who haven't. I'll tell you what's helped me actually in the next question. But in essence, it's about taking a step back, recognizing that there is a problem, and then thinking about what you can do about that, and taking action. Ignoring it, I think, is a real risk.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Simon. There have been times in my life where I've often bitten off too much, you know, well, more than I can chew. And sometimes in our passion and drive and enthusiasm, we kind of lack insight because we're so caught up in it. And it's taking that step back. And that's when I find family is really useful. And they're my kind of barometer of, you know, what is kind of realistic and possible and achievable. And it's really useful to have them at hand, just to sometimes grab me by the scruff of the neck and say, come on, just, you know, be sensible now, and reel it in a bit. And it's that kind of tough love sometimes which really helps me.
Thank you. And Rachel, as someone who's still at the very early stage of their career but is already doing so many different things, can you have it all? It sounds like you can. What are your kind of thoughts on this?
So thanks, Carter and Simon, and thanks especially Carter for sharing that story earlier on. Yeah, an incredible story. So I completely agree with both Simon and Carter. Yes, I think you can. I think from what Simon was saying, I completely agree about the sort of the balancing act element of it, and something I'm gradually being introduced to at the start of my career is trying to work out how to balance all of this stuff. And a lot of it is learning how and when to say no, and something I'm getting better at, I have to say. Yeah, that I think that initially to too many things, but working out exactly what you want to do, and then following those things through. I think the benefit, I think, of kind of juggling lots of things, I think that I've seen is actually kind of going back to some of the things we were talking about in the first question, is bringing that fresh perspective. And I think that's something that I don't think I'd quite realised. I think it's absolutely loads and loads of really, really good GPs who come in and be a GP, and they're fantastic GPs. But I know for me personally, to be a really, really good GP, I will need to do bring a fresh and caring and connected GP coming into work on a Monday morning or whenever, whether that's a childcare day, I don't know yet. Yeah, so I think there's working out what's best for you personally, and I think for me personally it will be juggling lots of different things. So I think it is how to balance that, and yeah, and also I think it's important to mention keeping up our clinical skills and knowledge, and keeping all of that up to date, so that we're also good GPs from a clinical perspective, and we can do the day job at the same time as juggling all of these things. But I do think juggling different things and amazing perspectives into a plan for patients.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think also it's important to recognize that getting the balance right for you at any one time will vary throughout the long career that you have hopefully long career that you have in general practice. And as Rachel's doing at the minute, when you start a family, what your perspective and what you want might change. You might develop an interest later on in your career. The fact is that within general practice, still, very early days of my post CCT career, there are so many options. I have had to change my sessions around to fit around the other work that I'm doing, and you can have that flexibility. And as Simon said earlier, it is a buyer's market at the minute. People, is that the right one? Whichever way around it is anyway. People are desperate for GPs. And so you're in a good position to be able to negotiate something that really works for you. And I think you can hear from all of our speakers that they've been able to carve out very different, but very, very fulfilling, exciting and inspiring careers as GPs. We are about halfway through at the minute, and we will come to questions. We've got one more question for our speakers, and then we will come to Q&A. So please do put any questions that you have in the chat as we're going. If you would like to address one of your questions to a specific speaker, just pop their name next to it and I will put it to them. And yeah, just anything and everything. We're happy to take any questions, so go for it in the chat. Our next question, before we go to the floor, is all about dealing with uncertainty. And as GPs, we deal with uncertainty all the time in consultations. But over the last 18 months, especially, we've had to deal with uncertainty all around us as well, not just in the clinical setting and in our professional lives, but also in our personal lives as well. And so the final question to our speakers is about any advice that they have for the audience on coping with tough times or uncertainty. What are the things that get you through? What are your kind of things that bring you joy if you're having a tough time? I'm really interested to hear about any advice that our speakers might have. Simon, I'm going to come to you first and hear any advice that you might have.
Okay, so I have a few points that have really made a difference to me. First of all would be, if possible, get yourself a mentor. I was so lucky that I stayed on at my practice as a partner where I was a registrar. My trainer at that time was effectively a mentor for me and has been for 28 years. It's a kind of an informal arrangement. We don't call it mentor-mentee. And probably 10, 15 years ago, we slipped from a mentor-mentee thing to equal footing, supporting, encouraging, challenging, questioning each other. So it's a mutually supportive thing. But it's been wonderful for me to have that headspace. And it's usually for us a walk, a chat, a coffee together, maybe an hour, a couple of hours. And it's really, really helpful to step back from the practice, to talk through the practice dynamics. That's the really difficult stuff that many GPs struggle with. The registrars that I see coming through are clinically very good. The comm skills are very good, but they flounder in the complexity and the complex world of general practice and the interactions and the dynamics between partners and salaried GPs. So having somebody to talk it through with is really, really helpful. Fortunately, the Royal College has just opened a new mentoring scheme, which is free to RCGP members. There are many trainers like myself who offer themselves as mentors, and as a sort of first 5 RCGP member, you can ask from a mentor, and I'd encourage all of you to do that. I think we also need to acknowledge that general practice is a phenomenally difficult job, and you out there are amazing. We carry bucket loads of uncertainty, and that's really, really hard. And there's not many people out there that can carry as much uncertainty as a GP. That's why I think people with perfectionist tendencies find it hard and can often struggle in general practice, because GPs, in order to survive a career, often have to be pragmatists. And at times, in general practice, when the shit's hitting the fan, you can't practice that perfect medicine. You can't follow the nice guidance perfectly. You can't do everything that you think you should. Sometimes it's just about keeping your head above water, about surviving, about practicing primary care that's adequate. It's okay. It's sufficient. It doesn't sound great, and if you're doing that all the time, you need to take a step back and rethink. But actually, at times, we all have to do that. And everybody, every GP should have permission to just be okay and just be adequate at periods of huge stress. It's a really interesting economist called Herbert Simon who coined the word satisficing. And satisficing is about reducing risk to an acceptable minimum. And that's what we do day in, day out, often without thinking about it, is we're just trying to reduce risk to a level that's acceptable. And often when the stress builds up and the pressure builds up, managing uncertainty becomes harder. And that's when I see GPs, my registrars, struggle. They start checking more, examining more, over-investigating, over-referring, over-prescribing. Those are worrying patterns that I look out for and that we all need to look out for in our own practice. And if you see them, take some time to step back, speak to a trusted colleague and work it through. Two more things. Find something that you care passionately about. And these either Rachel, Carter, Anthony have got passions that have driven them. For me, it's about lifestyle medicine, for social prescribing, for parkrun and promoting physical activity. And that's a pleasure to do that. It doesn't feel like work. It's a real joy. And whatever your real joy and your passion is, go with it. Lastly, forget about the money. The money doesn't matter. All of you are going to earn shed loads over a career. I'm more wealthy than I ever dreamt growing up in a school in state school in North London. So don't do anything for the money. Focus on what really matters to you. And if it's good for your soul and good for your heart, you'll be really good at it and you'll be a great GP. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Really, really great words of advice. Carter, I'm going to come to you next. Any words of advice for people going through tough times, handling uncertainty?
Yeah, thank you. I think Simon's nicked all of my ideas, or vice versa. So I'm just going to cover the things that Simon's not mentioned. So there's I'm a fellow of the Faculty of Medical Leadership and Management, and when I was doing my fellowship, I came across a term called VUCA, which I'm sure you've heard of, and it stands for Volatility, Uncertainty, Complexity, and Ambiguity. And as you've heard from my past, I came across all of those in bucket loads. And when all the cards in the deck were stacked against me, having survived and then thrived and then come out the other end has motivated me and shown me that anything is possible. And I draw upon these coping mechanisms and strategies to challenge those negative automatic thoughts, which we all get millions of times a day. And I also find it really useful to be able to visualize and define success and positive outcomes. And that's really important for me. And I use it daily. And just also speaking positivity into the universe. I know that sounds really hippie-ish and really Glastonbury, but I'm a real strong believer in it. And I think also following on from that, what's helped me is random acts of kindness and serving others. I know it sounds corny, but if you reflect on it and you think about how you can do that every day, like give things back to society, is so important. And we're blessed in our profession that, our jobs or lifestyles naturally lend themselves and align themselves to these goals. And it's only when you've been on the receiving end as a patient, or metaphorically, if you've been in a position where you're dying of thirst and someone puts that one life-saving drop of water into your mouth, only then do you realize the value and grace of charity and kindness. And we're all in a position as GPs to be able to do that via general practice every day. And as Simon said, don't chase the money. Chasing the money is the best way you won't earn anything ever. If you chase your passion, if you're good at something, if you're the best at something, money will follow. Money's the byproduct. It shouldn't be the primary goal. So they're my little hints and tips and tricks.
Thanks, Carter. And finally, I'll come to Rachel. I feel unfair coming to you last after so many great words of advice from Simon and Carter. But yeah, any thoughts that you have on this topic?
No problem at all. Thank you, Anthony. So I was having a think about this earlier today, and I came into the pandemic, which was a period of uncertainty and difficulty for so many people in such an awful time, with a lot of uncertainty in my life. So I was been struggling with infertility for the last 5 years, and had multiple rounds of fertility treatment that had failed, and had been dealing with a lot of uncertainty coming into the pandemic. So cancelling plans at last minute, not knowing quite what next month held, that sort of thing. And I have a 6-month-old now, conceived rainbow baby in lockdown, which is absolutely wonderful. But I'm aware there's a lot of people who that doesn't happen for. But I do feel I've learned a lot of lessons from that, actually, and having that period of uncertainty and seeing a lot of people going through a lot of uncertainty in the pandemic, I could see quite a lot of parallels. And for me personally, I found that actually just kind of living in the present a little bit more, I found really beneficial. So trying to think about ways in which I can be grateful on a day-to-day basis, think about the positives. A lot of it kind of repeats a lot of what Carter was just saying about kindness and being grateful, living in the present, that sort of thing. But also there's a lot of things that are just really out of were and have been outside of my control. So trying to control the things that I can control, but not focus too much on the things that I couldn't control. And that's so much easier said than done. But there's a lot of that can apply to general practice and work. And I found that more recently I've been much better at that. So thinking, right, I can't control that, I'm not going to worry about it, and trying to move on. As I say, it is much more easier said than done. The other thing is of taking opportunities. So if I had had a child when I wanted to have a child 5 years ago, I wouldn't have done all of the amazing things I've been doing now. So there's lots of positives you can take from periods of uncertainty and not really knowing quite where to go next. And there are so many opportunities available. So get chatting to people, just put yourself out there, and there's just so many things you can do. So things like the Leadership Fellowship, things like professional coaching, that sort of thing. There were so many things earlier in career that, particularly in first 5, that there were so many opportunities available. And if particularly if you're feeling like you're going through a period of uncertainty, what I'd just say is just look and find things, because there are lots of those things that you can do.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you've heard from our speakers that they do such a wide variety of different things, have had very different career journeys, and there's no right or wrong time to start thinking about what you want to do in your future career in general practice. And there is an ever increasing amount of support and advice and guidance and mentorship that you can get at any stage of your career, but especially early on when you're really starting to think about these things. And particularly at the minute, as Rachel says, it's a very uncertain time to be entering the world of general practice when the world is constantly changing around us. And so really do make the most of those types of resources. They will vary slightly from place to place depending on where you are in the country, but the RCGP is always a great first port of call to come to find these types of resources. As Simon said, there's a new mentorship program, there's all of the events that they do, and if you get in touch with any of the team here, they'll always be able to hopefully connect you with somebody who will be able to help you with any of the questions that you have. We haven't got any questions in the, well, you've got one question in the chat about the college from Antoinette. Hello, Antoinette, which is about how to basically starting off your career and whether the college has had a role in your career, I guess. So we can go to that for each of you. Maybe if we go to, I'd be interested to go to Rachel first, actually, as someone who's kind of starting out in your career. What role has the college had for you so far, if any? And what are your kind of reflections on how the college can provide support to people who are either thinking about a career in general practice or early on in their career?
Thanks, Anthony. I think it's an interesting one, that one, because I think there's a common feeling among trainees that the college is for exams, and it's exam and that was it. But I think there's a lot more that college can offer. I think for me, I think my first interaction with the college was with going to conference, and I think Helen Stokes Lampard being chair was particularly inspirational for me, because she's just an absolutely fantastic speaker, and yeah, a lot of her focus was on kind of on patient-centered care, and obviously now she's taken on a role with social prescribing, which is just something that I think is really important. So I think kind of seeing inspirational role models within the college has been really helpful for me. I also feel the same at the moment, pretty inspirational guy, and yeah, I think having had a role in the RCGP Health Inequality Standing Group, it's really interesting to see that the college does have quite a lot of impetus nationally and politically. So I think we do, as GPs, have a voice, and with that voice. So I think that'd be.
Thank you, Rachel. Simon, you've obviously put in the chat that joining one of the RCGP faculty committees was a really important step for you. Can you elaborate on that a bit more about how you found that a helpful process as part of your career journey?
Yeah, well, it all started off for me when I was a Maida Fellow of the Royal College about 10 years ago, which was a wonderful thing to do, and a real sort of privilege and an honour. But I felt I didn't deserve it. I went to that awards ceremony, and you're surrounded by these astonishing, amazing doctors who have achieved astonishing things, and I felt I was deeply unworthy of it. So I decided I needed to pull my finger out and actually, do something to merit the fellowship I'd been given. So I got involved with my local faculty. It's really good. We meet probably 3 or 4 times, maybe 4 times a year. And through that, it got me out more. And I'd really encourage people to get out of their practices, get out. I live in Southport, and it's a little closed community. I had no idea what people like Carter and Rachel and Anthony were doing on a sort of national level. And once you start getting out there through the Royal College, it's inspirational, the people you get connected with, and stuff spins off that. And for me, it's all come through the Royal College. I'd never been, this is so embarrassing, I'd never been to the Royal College annual conference till about 10 years ago. That's awful. And when I went, it blew my mind. I just saw some astonishing GPs. I saw Claire Gerarda, I've seen Helen Stokes Lampard. They're awe-inspiring. And if you want motivation as a GP, get along to the annual conference. It's an astonishing event.
Thank you, Simon. And Carter, obviously you've got a number of roles at the RCGP, so I can imagine that your answer is going to be a positive one, but it would be good to hear about your experiences with the college throughout your career as well.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I'll keep it brief, but I went to the first ever RCGP conference back in, I think it was 2006, and I think that was my first year of training. And I'm technically part of the new breed of trainees, because I was the first trainee, one of the first cohort to sit the exams as you know them at the moment. So the AKT and the CSA, RCA now, but CSA then. Before the year before me, they were all Vivas and the old system to get the MRCGP. So I was one of the first years where it was compulsory to have MRC GP as an exit exam for CCT. And I went to the college conferences, and like Simon said, I was awe-inspired by seeing all these inspirational, illustrious GPs doing all this great stuff. Before CCG started, I became a clinical commissioning champion for the college. That was back in 2010, one of my first roles with the college. And then, as Simon was saying, I got my fellowship about 5 years ago now, and I felt this feeling like imposter syndrome that Simon was describing. I thought, what am I doing here in this auditorium, being awarded this scroll, and all these other people are sitting around me, much more deserving than me. And so almost I had to do like what Simon said, act up to try and justify the merit and the honor of that, and joined my local faculty, started to learn how the college works, and then became the faculty rep on national council. And then seeing the 50, 60 people on council meetings was just mind-blowing, just to see that room full of so many big brains and feeling completely humbled by the experience and learning from them and being inspired and motivated by them. And so for me, yeah, the college has played a big role. And more recently, as the pandemic has shone a spotlight onto inequalities that exist in our society and deepen those inequalities, I've sat also recently on 2 task and finish groups, the EDI group and the BAME group, to try and raise the profile of inequalities in healthcare and try and reduce the impact on vulnerable, deprived groups in our society. So for me, the college is the backbone of excellence in standards and training and education, and I'm just honoured to be part of it, really. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, and the college.
Thanks, Carter. I'm going to give my 2 cents on this as well. I feel like I have to, as I was the AIT chair before. But yeah, I mean, for me, throughout the very early stage of my career and my training, the college has really given me an insight into the full range of opportunities that you can have as a GP. It's allowed me to connect, as everybody else has said, with so many inspiring and amazing colleagues. I've made some amazing friends, I've made some amazing professional relationships, and already had so many opportunities that I've been able to take advantage of because of the college. And in many ways, the roles that I've had through the college, whether that was being AIT chair last year, I've been part of the college's LGBT steering group. I was again part of a couple of task and finish groups on human rights and working with oppressive regimes. I've been part of my local faculty board. There are so many options and opportunities here that it really does show you what your career can be. And final question that we're going to have to take is one that is all about, as a trainee, is it too early to cultivate other roles and interests? Should focus at this stage be on getting through training, passing exams? This is from Richard. I don't think there's any right or wrong answer to this. I think the beauty of GP, and that can include your training, is that you can make it work for you. For me, when I was doing my training, I took time out to do my leadership fellowship. I came back less than full time, was doing my AIT role for the time that I wasn't in clinical work. Also had a role at the college at the time as a person-centered care fellow. So I was doing loads of stuff at the college and had the opportunity to cultivate lots of additional interests, which I personally felt really enhanced my clinical experience as well. So I don't think there's a right or wrong time, but I think it's finding a time which is right for you. And for some people, their training is a really important time for focusing on getting through training. It's already difficult enough. We have so many hoops to jump through and milestones to meet that sometimes it is important to just focus on getting through that. But everyone will be different and everyone can find a way which works for them. And ultimately, whether you do it during training or after training or 10 years or more than 10 years into your career as a GP, the fact is that your career can always be evolving and changing. And I've learned that from my own experiences so far, but also from meeting and speaking to people like Carter and Simon, who are a bit further along in their career and can see that there are always new opportunities to take advantage of. That's what I would say about the college. And the college can be a gateway to really learning for some of that stuff.
And Anthony, that's a great, sorry to butt in, Anthony, that's a great wrap up and summary, but you've reminded me about one very quick thing about the college, and that is, you may have seen a lot of, everyone's seen it, college bashing going on social media. What has the college ever done for us? I flip that round. I put the challenge out to other people and say, what have you done for the college? And when you look at it from that perspective, that's when you start to get involved. So that's all I wanted to add in there.
Thanks, Carter. So we are kind of drawing to a close. I did have one question though, which is purely for Simon and not really relevant to this. But Simon, I do think you're standing at the minute, and I was just interested in your clinical work. Do you stand? Do you have a standing desk? Do you have any advice for kind of incorporating more physical activity into your clinical work as well?
Yes, I do have a standing desk and I absolutely love it. And I would urge and encourage you all to go out there and experiment with one. Mine cost, I think, 100 quid from Amazon. And I do certainly all my telephone and video stuff standing up, all my sort of paperwork, admin standing up, and I absolutely love it. I was getting back pain from sitting for 6 hours a day in my surgery, and that's all gone since I started standing up. I also have meetings on foot. So today I had a 2-hour tutorial with my registrar. Beautiful morning. We went to the park and we walked round and round the park, looking at the ducks, chatting about all things general practice, and that was lovely. I have clinical meetings with social prescribers, meetings with our nurses. I do appraisals on foot as well, just walking around the park when the weather permits, and it's a really, really lovely way to do it. I think humans think better on their feet. So it's a really good environment for teaching and learning and listening to each other rather than sitting face to face in the room.
Yeah, I mean, definitely agree. I have all my best ideas, I feel, when I'm walking or reflection. So yeah, incorporating that more into meetings, I think, is a great way forward. Do you have any experience with people doing, I know that there are some groups, sorry, this is like completely off topic, but some groups who do more like walking style consultations. Do you have any experience, whether you're personally or other people that you know that are doing something similar, whether that's support groups or actual consultation?
Yes, I set up a practice walking group about 3 years ago, and it's a kind of hodgepodge of people who meet at my local park where my park run is, and we walk around for about 3/4 of an hour on a Thursday afternoon, and it's not, we don't do clinical consultations, but I do get to know my patients better. I find out more about them as people. And that really helps me as a GP, just connect with, stop seeing them as patients and seeing them as people within their own lives and understanding more about them. So there's a huge benefit. I used to be really scared of bumping into my patients outside the practice. It's fine. I've not found that my patients abuse it or take advantage of it or ask me difficult medical questions that that I don't want to explore. And it's really, really enjoyable. So do think about it, but clearly make sure you're safe, make sure you're within professional boundaries.
Yeah. Thank you. So we are at 8:30. Unfortunately, we are going to have to draw a close to things. Thank you so much to Rachel, Simon and Carter. That was really, really fascinating for me. I hope that everybody who's joined us really enjoyed that as well. I think, you've shared so much wisdom and inspiration. So thank you so much for talking with us this evening. I believe we've got a final slide to share with some resources on. So yeah, this is just a slide which is sharing some wellbeing resources. So there's things here like the NHS Practitioner Health Programme, Frontline 19, the RCGP wellbeing resources, Help Me I'm a Doctor, BMA Counselling and the Doctor Advice Service. As we mentioned at the beginning, we have touched on some difficult and sensitive areas this evening. And also we just recognise that it's a very difficult time for many people to be working in a healthcare field at the minute. And so if you need to utilise any of these resources or to reach out and talk to us at any time, then please do utilise them. And these are kind of well-regarded resources which you can go to. If you are a GP in training, also remember that you can go to your clinical supervisor at any time, also your educational supervisor, who will always be in general practice. And beyond that, you also have your training program director, who is there to help and provide support. I know I got a huge amount of support from my training program directors when I was still a trainee. The link for feedback is also going to be shared in the chat right now. Please do let us know what your thoughts on today are, anything that went well, anything that can be improved. And all of the recordings from today are also going to be made available after the event. Another final thanks to all of our amazing speakers. Thank you so much, Carter, Rachel and Simon. Thank you also to everybody that's joined us and spent their evening with us and for your attention. And yeah, all of the recordings are going to be made available for people to watch after this as well. So thanks again to our speakers. Thanks to everybody for coming, and we'll speak to you soon.